from the BBC World Service in association with ABC and All India Radio. This is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell in Adelaide, hopped across from Melbourne, but I think I've only really just recovered from commentating on the climax of that incredible women's test match at Manica Oval in Canberra. The best ever, smashing audience figures, dramatic climax, twists and turns, high-level cricket from professionals. It really was astounding, but enjoying a little bit of time to catch up with family members here in Adelaide over the next week or so.
Hello, Jim Maxwell in Sydney. Yes, at last we got a good test match this summer between England and Australia, but it took the women to provide it, and let's hope we get more test matches in women's cricket. It was exhilarating, really wonderful drama at Manica in Canberra to round off that game. And it's still going with the one-days and then the Women's World Cup. Women's World cricket is at a peak, in a place that you never thought a few years ago we'd get to. Good on them. It's great to watch.
Well, I think I've confessed enough times that I too am a big fan of women's cricket, and I'm glad that I caught a bit of that Ashes women's test. It was truly fantastic. Ali, lucky that you were involved there. Hello, I'm Charu Sharma for All India Radio. This day in Pune, because of South Asia's only ATP Tour event that happens year after year. I've done it, over 2 decades now. It's a fabulous event, the Tata Open Maharashtra. So that goes on, but of course, India awaits the presence of the West Indies, even though some of the players in India are unfortunately COVID positive. So this pandemic thing is just not leaving us, is it? Even here at the Tata Open Maharashtra. Luckily, the tournament is on despite all the problems. I can only imagine how difficult it was for the organizers, but I'm truly glad to be here.
We're going to start in Melbourne, and we'll hear from the first Indian to play in the Men's Big Bash League. Now, Unmukt Chand captained India to the Under-19 World Cup back in 2012, but now he's made his debut for the Melbourne Renegades. However, the rules of the BCCI who run Indian cricket say that any Indian men's player, whether they're contracted to the board or not, is not allowed to play any franchise cricket outside of India. So how did Unmukt make it happen? Well, I caught up with him to find out and began by asking him what it was like to debut in the Big Bash.
Well, it was great, first of all to, be picked for the Renegades and getting to play the Big Bash League. I've always, followed Big Bash, and it was nice to play at Melbourne where, obviously there's a huge Indian community and, it's a sports playing city, you can say that. And really loved being around here. And though we didn't have a great season and I got my chances pretty late in the tournament, but nonetheless, it was a good experience, and I've got good things to take home with me.
So let's get your whole story, because you had to take a pretty big decision around your Indian cricket career in order to, eventually be here playing for Renegades in Australia. Take us back to your decision making and where your career was in India before you decided to walk away from Indian cricket.
This was never the plan, and it just happened so quickly. And last 2 years I didn't have a great time with my state team, the Delhi team. I was getting dropped frequently. It was difficult, sort of, stagnancy I had creeped in, and so I thought that it's best to now look at my chances outside, and not having got to play a single game for Delhi team in the 2021 season was something of a shocker to me. And I think that's when I decided that I'll probably, explore my opportunities outside as well. And that's when I, went to the US as well, and, sort of saw how things were running there. And once I was sure of it, that's when I, signed the contract with them.
Did it tug at your heartstrings to have to decide to leave the Indian system completely? Because just to explain to people, when it comes to outside leagues, the BCCI don't allow Indian male cricketers to play in T20 leagues outside of the system, no matter what level you're at. But whenever you're in the system, I suppose you always have that dream, which must have always been there from when you were the under-19s captain.
Well, big time. I mean, that was probably the most difficult decision of my life to having, quit in cricket. And, as a youngster, when you grow up playing cricket in India, and, for me especially, I woke up every day thinking, and my ambition was to play for the country, to wear that cap to play for the country is something very, very special. It took me a lot of time to even come to the acceptance that no, India is never going to happen again. But we got to find our own ways. And as a cricketer, you know that you have limited opportunities and limited time frame to do the best you can, and you want to gain the maximum out of the opportunities which you get. And that's when I probably thought that I'll probably go this way because I want to play cricket.
So would you suggest to perhaps other cricketers who are maybe falling by the wayside in domestic cricket in India, struggling to realise their dreams there, that there is actually an alternative pathway? Do you think others might follow you in becoming a freelance cricketer and looking at cricket in other countries who would lap up the experience that somebody like you has got?
Well, lots of phone calls have definitely come to me regarding this, and I mean, see, at the end of the day, I'm not a sort of a messiah for all these players or anyone, right? I mean, I just chose my way. People want to choose it, they might choose it. If they don't want to choose it, they won't choose it. See, again, it's a very different ball game. You might go and play cricket in some other country for some time and go back home. Settling altogether in a new country is a very different ball game, and I mean, if someone is willing to do that, they might explore that option. And that option is always there. I mean, yeah, up to them. But yeah, I have got a lot of phone calls from a lot of people, not just cricketers, but administration, trainers, coaches, for exploring the options.
So, Unmukt, is it time for the BCCI to lift their restriction on Indian domestic male cricketers playing in leagues around the world? Because you, if you were able to, could have looked to play elsewhere and not have had to have left the Indian system entirely. Is it time for that rule to change?
I mean, yeah, it would have been a very ideal if this was a situation that I could still play, a couple of leagues like the other players do, and be in the same system. That would have been an ideal situation. I wouldn't have to leave my country, and but it's not there. That's the harsh reality of it, and maybe that rule changes, maybe not, but that time will tell.
Unmukt, good luck for the future then in chasing your new set of ambitions, and thanks so much for sharing your story on Stumped.
Thank you so much. Thanks, pleasure.
That is Unmukt Chand, now based in the USA and having made a debut for Melbourne Renegades. Charu, it's really interesting chatting to him because he obviously found opportunities limited in India when he lost form. He will not be the only Indian domestic player to find themselves sidelined and their cricketing ambitions quelled. Do you think others might follow suit in exiting India to pursue cricket still?
Well, on the face of it, they shouldn't they? Because, I mean, there are so many other shores around the world where they can ply their trade. But I think it's a little more complicated because the Indian setup, I'm not suggesting it's vastly different as Unmukt is from the rest of the world. He says, well, it's a very different setup. I mean, what do? You get up, you play hard, you play cricket, and hopefully get absorbed into the system. He had a particularly rough time, I think, dealing, as he, of course, alluded to, the fact that he wasn't selected for every match. Now, a lot of people might have other sides to that story, saying that, it happens once in a while. You just have to be tougher enough. And, of course, tough enough. And secondly, you've got to raise your standard to be undroppable in the future if you're just that much better. Unmukt sadly had a lot of, after the under-19 success and the early success, he was made captain of the team as well in the North. And I just think he succumbed to the pressure. To answer your question, yes, absolutely. A lot of other youngsters or people who are just beyond the peak of their career might well be thinking of fresh pastures such as the US.
Jim, I mentioned to Unmukt that the sense of the BCCI's ruling, should it be changed, can you ever see them lifting that restriction so that players like Unmukt could actually explore alternative opportunities without having to leave the system?
I hope so. It wouldn't be guaranteed.
Charu's already shaking his head.
I'm looking forward to the days, I've often said on this program, when Pakistan can have their cricketers playing in the IPL. That's the most unreasonable situation imaginable, restraint of trade, because of the politics that goes on between those two countries. And yet they can go off and play in Abu Dhabi and Adelaide and Birmingham and other places against each other. So, come on, let's have a bit of freedom here so that everyone can get together. The Indian players can play wherever they like, subject to contract, and other players can play in their league who aren't allowed to at the moment. Free trade arrangements for individuals.
If the world of cricket, that's all the rest of the big countries, want the Indian players to go around the world and have that democracy we talk about, there's only one way. Is it ever going to happen? All the rest of the countries need to say, we are not coming to play the IPL. unless Indian players come and play our leagues. That's the only way.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on ABC and All India Radio.
Next on Stumped, the fallout from the men's Ashes series has begun, with England Director of Cricket Ashley Giles standing down after the 4-0 hammering in Australia. England have won only one of their last 14 tests. Sir Andrew Strauss, who's the man Giles replaced in 2018, he's going to take temporary charge, so he'll make arrangements for the tour of West Indies in March. Now, the statement from Ashley Giles has read, "Despite the challenges over the last 3 years, we have become 50-over world champions, the top-ranked T20 international side in the world. We remain the fourth-ranked test team, and our under-19s have just reached the World Cup final for the first time in 24 years. Giles concludes, "I wish all our players and staff great success for the future." Jim, it's a bit euphemistic, isn't it, to say Ashley Giles has stood down, as the ECB put it. What was your reaction to the news?
Well, I wasn't surprised after what we saw with England visiting Australia and their ineptitude in the Ashes, probably the worst performance by an England team in the whole history of the Ashes, at least going back to the 19th century. So something had to give. And I know England have played a lot of Test cricket this year, and they can talk about COVID bubbles and all sorts of peripheral things that may have affected their performance. But the bottom line was they could barely get to 3 days of Test cricket and be competitive. So where they go from here with the structure of their cricket, or how they manage to get an improved Test squad, I don't know the answers. But maybe someone else has got the answers other than Ashley Giles, and I would imagine Chris Silverwood will follow him out the door very soon. So it's time to, as it were, sweep the cupboard, get some new blokes in, and hope that Joe Root can get the support he needs to make England a genuinely competitive, consistently competitive Test team, so that by the time we get to, say, the next Ashes, then England can compete.
Yeah, and Charu, we had the discussion on this show about the structural changes, if you like, and the depth of changes that have been raging, that have been needed across the England game. But you'll always expect that these sort of visible changes of personnel would be the first thing to happen.
Yes, but I will go on to say that I think it's absolutely ridiculous that people start resigning for something that they're not directly responsible for. You can say they are very indirectly responsible. Giles, perhaps Silverwood, and of course Joe Root and everybody down the line, every single player, matter of fact. But, Giles is not playing for England right now. Silverwood is not up there batting and scoring 0 for England. Now, either you're suggesting that you've chosen all the wrong people to be in charge of cricket in England. I know Silverwood's doing a lot, and there should be more people handling these affairs, just so as the responsibility is kind of distributed. But if we keep resigning for every single setback, there'll be nobody left in the world. I mean, if we keep, cutting our hand off for every mistake we've made, every single hand in the world will be cut off, or whatever other analogy. So this resignation thing, it's sometimes people do it before they get sacked, just to save a little bit of face, and even the sacking, why? Because you are presuming that the people in charge who know their cricket are putting a certain responsibility behind their decision-making. And why then leave that? I think you've got to pull through and work even harder. England are the reigning ODI champions. They are in the final of the under-19 right now. They've done pretty well. They're number 4. So one bad series here, then the other. This whole resignation thing, to my mind, doesn't solve anything.
It could be even worse, I suppose, when you look at the way things are managed. When you consider that the team that won this series and the T20 World Cup was all angst about Justin Langer's future. I mean, why would you want to be changing things? So it doesn't matter whether you're winning or losing. There's always some personality thing that's going on, particularly when you've got wobbly management. So even the victors are having their issues with how they're going to manage their team.
I was going to say, by the time this podcast goes out, we might know more about Justin Langer's future, certainly after this weekend or an important board meeting on Friday. But yeah, we're talking about changes in the England camp when they lost 4-0, but it's the successful Ashes winning coach who may well not be in charge for much longer. But Chris Silverwood, I don't know if the feeling is really that the camp, I think he's very popular with the players, but maybe a degree of coziness there. It's not quite, almost sort of being firm enough or he seemed to be a man sort of out of his depth, sort of floundering somewhat when England were losing. And he had a tough time of it because he got COVID in the middle of the Ashes and had to isolate with his family and miss a test match as well. But, you do wonder, the people right at the very top of the game, whether it's Tom Harrison, needs to start looking at some of the decisions he's made and the leadership through the organisation, and where the ECB finds itself in at the moment with the race inquiries as well that have been going on. But I just wonder, we're going to see Andrew Strauss come back in, Jim, temporarily to replace Ashley Giles as director of cricket. Do you think he's, the right person to steady the ship? It seems to be the same people going round and round England cricket at the moment.
Well, as Charu has alluded to, none of these people are actually playing for England. So there's a management game that's going on. But at the end of the day, you need to have the personnel in order to perform. And England, to a large extent, have performed okay here and there. But when you have a loss like they just had in Australia, and you've got no chance in an Ashes series, as we know in Australia, you don't make a good start, you can't change the momentum. You don't have time. You don't have breathing space. It's just at you. And I'm not sure whether things are going to improve in the immediate future or not. But Strauss is a strong man. He's got good opinions. He was the one that really got England to the position of winning one-day cricket matches when they were losing them horrendously. So maybe he can have some influence on the direction in terms of Test cricket. But it's all going to be a bit of a process.
Well, Alison, I'm going to quickly add that, there is obviously this debate, particularly in England, I suppose, between white ball and red ball, that white ball cricket is being more encouraged or is just more successful, and that's where all the attention and energy and effort's going. I think England are only responding to where the world of cricket's going. I feel for those who are leading their positions, because ultimately it's the players in there. How much can the coach really do sitting outside on field, looking at a computer and kind of wearing his dark glasses, and what then?
So do you think there has been a huge shift and imbalance towards white ball cricket domestically in England, and changes are already being made in terms of the way the domestic championship season is going to be structured next year? There will be more games played in the height of the England summer. So that is absolutely a good sign. But, that's not going to sort of immediately translate into massive success. Well, that is it for this week's Stumped here on All India Radio. Don't forget, you can keep in touch with us throughout the week. We're at BBCWS Sport. Use the hashtag BBC Stumped. My thanks to Charu, Sharma and Jim Maxwell, and of course to you for listening. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Stumped is a BBC sport production for the BBC World Service, in association with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and All India Radio.